Hey guys, it's one of your tutors here, Rachel, and I just wanted to show you how we can approach part two of the last activity of refactoring code for this week's design programming class. So I'm just going to go through the code and sort of show you what I've done, what I'm going to do. So when we are refactoring code, the way that we want to approach it is by looking for things that are repeating. And so we can see here, I'll just zoom in again just so I can see a little bit more. We can see here that what's happening is a background is being drawn. We're defining two variables, and then we're drawing an ellipse with a fill. Okay, we're then redefining those two variables and drawing a new ellipse with a different fill. And we're doing that 4 times. So you should already be able to see some repeating code. We're then incrementing our angle variable, which is defined as a global variable starting at 0. So the first thing that we can do is the same thing that we did last time in the part 1 step, which is to use this custom function down here called draw offset ellipse to replace the repeating fill and ellipse code. So if I just copy that and I put that in my draw offset ellipse, I can sort of see what I need to start with in terms of what I need to change. So you can see up here, every single one of these ellipses that's being drawn starts with this width divided by 2. And so there's a repeating bit of code, but it also, all of them all add this x value, okay? The difference though is that the x value changes because we're redefining them before we're drawing a new ellipse. So they are different values. So what we can do to start with is we can draw an ellipse with width divided by 2 plus what we're going to call our x offset, which we can see is already a parameter defined within the draw offset ellipse function. And we can do the same with our height divided by 2 plus y, replacing that y with our y offset, because you can see the same thing here. Our height divided by 2 plus y is repeated every single time, but our y value is changing every time because we are redefining it every time we're drawing a new ellipse. The other thing that stays the same is this ellipse size. That is a global variable defined up here as 25, so that can stay the same down here. And then the fill changes every time, so we're going to want to use a variable in the fill value within draw offset ellipse that we can then change using this myColor parameter that we have put in. So what I can do now is I can replace my ellipses up here. So instead of having these 2 lines of code where we've written fill and ellipse, we can put our new draw offset ellipse function in, and we can change the x offset to being x, because that is adding the x offset, which in our case right now, currently it is x, and y, and then we're going to change the color to being this fill that was predefined. You can do this 2 ways. You could do it in a color function and include the 3 RGB values that way, or you could do it in an array, which we haven't gone over yet. So I understand if you're more comfortable just using the color function, that's absolutely fine. And so if we were to remove this right now, I won't remove it actually, I'll just comment it out. You should be able to see that nothing has changed in the code yet. So if I comment that out and I put this back in, just because I didn't actually play this beforehand, it's the exact same thing. But instead of using 2 lines of code, we're only using 1 line of code. And so now I can copy this as I go, changing the fill every single time, because that is the difference between all of these ellipses currently. It's simply the fill. So if I do third one, roughly. And so it's the exact same. Nothing's changed. But we've already lost 4 lines of code by turning each of those 2 lines into 1 line of code. So now I can remove the old code and I can see that we still have a few things that are repeating, right? So you can see from the scaffolding code that we've given you these 2 custom functions called getNextX and getNextY. And so from that you can derive that what we're wanting you to do is create functions that simplify the process of redefining x and y every single time we're drawing an ellipse. And so if we look through these variables, we can see that it's using rotation radius, which is a global variable up here, and timesing that by the sine of angle. And then the next time we're redefining x, it's doing the same thing, except that it's adding pi divided by 2 to that angle value. And that's the same for the next time, and that's the same for the time after that. This last little part here is the only thing that's changing every time we're redefining x, sorry. So what we can do is we could actually just take this equation and we can put it inside of our getNext x function and return the value of this equation. Instead of assigning it to a variable, we're just going to return the value of the equation. And we can add angle offset to our angle. And instead of using this angle value here, we're going to change that to being angle offset, just so that we don't confuse this variable name with the variable name that we already have, which is defining this global variable up here. And so what this code is going to do, if we want to just double check that this is going to work, is it should do the same thing. So we can replace our x value here with this little bit of code and change the angle to get x angle offset to 0 in this instance. I'm just going to copy this out, actually, and double check that that is doing the same thing. Yep, that's doing the same thing. And then, so we can do that every single time, just replacing this x value, x variable, in the x offset value spot, and changing that parameter, that x angle offset parameter, every time to add what we need from the x value. Instead of, the previous one it was 0, now it's pi divided by 2. The next time it's going to be just pi. And what we're doing is we're doing the same thing, but we're just simplifying the way that it's happening. So this one, I'm going to copy this, chuck it in here, and then we can just sort of comment out all of our x's and double check that it has done what we want it to do. Amazing, we have not broken the code. So you can see, we can now get rid of these lines here. And we can do the same thing for the y value. So if we just do simply the same thing, we return the value of this equation, and we're going to add an angle offset. We can use the same variable name because they're being defined within different scopes, so they're not going to affect each other. And so instead of getNextX like we just used, we're going to use our getNextY function in this place of this y and change our angle offset. So in this case it's 0 because we're not adding anything more to angle. Then in the next case it's going to be pi divided by 2. After that it's just going to be pi. And then this time we're doing 3 times pi. Oops, sorry. Divided by 2. Okay, let's just comment these out. Notice I'm commenting them out instead of deleting them, just in case I do break something, which I didn't. So now I can get rid of these. And you can see that we have gone from something like 16 lines of code down to 4 lines of code that are drawing these 4 ellipses. And so it's a lot easier to see that I'm drawing an offset ellipse and I can see what that function is doing. I'm then using this getNextX function in place of my x offset. I'm then using the getNextY function in place of my y offset, and I'm defining my color as an RGB fill that will fill each of my ellipses. Hopefully that's helped you look at how to refactor code in the future. Have fun.